What do we got today?
Here's an article in the New York Times, James, on how the moratoriums and the added benefits that kicked in because of coronavirus are going to run out at the end of the month or starting at the end of September. I think it's an important story, but I just want to get your thoughts, as someone who's kind of got their finger on the pulse of things that are happening in the labor markets, on spending, on what do you think is going to happen?
I think that adulting hashtag on Instagram is about to get real.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, uh, I think everyone was looking at. I mean, we tried to buy a house this year. It's pure hell. And I just had a family friend trying to buy a house not far from me, but they bid 30K over ask, and they ended up losing, and they were only number 8. And it kind of tells you the absurdity of what's going on right now. But it took me a year to find a bike. I call bike shop, and they're like, "Yeah, we sold out. This is last year. We're sold out of 2021, and that's last year, right? It's 2020. They're telling me they're already sold out of 2021s. Do you want to order 2022?" I mean, what the hell are you talking about? I ain't waiting 2 years to get a bike. And I think we've all been trying to figure out, like, well, why, where's this inflation coming from? Why can't we buy anything? And when you look at the four things here, and this article talks about, right? We had the windfall from unemployment insurance, people not paying their rent and or mortgages, and not paying school loans. So, Kane, how much do you think that adds up per month for some of these people?
It's a lot.
I think it's a goddamn a lot of money. Um, I have a family member that's got an apartment, and above the unit above them, he knows their acquaintance, but that person hasn't worked in a year or more, and has made references to not paying rent.
Yeah.
But they also got a new Jeep outside, and this is a $700 a month is 650. Like, it's not. These people aren't balling out of control over here. Okay, it's possible she's got inheritance or family helps her. Who knows? But the general thought is if you're in this complex, you don't have a lot of money. It's lower income. But it's like, well, how do you not work for a year and then buy a new Jeep? There's so many red flags in the economy right now. And you realize, what is it, this month? Into this month, though, you got to start paying rent, right?
Hmm.
And then school loans and mortgages kick in September.
Yep, exactly. At the end of September.
Into September. And I think some states already killed the unemployment, extra benefits.
Yep.
And depending where you got on it, I think some places you're going to be able to ride that out until the fall. And it seems like everything's going to get real. Like, the unemployment's going to end, and then you got to pay all your bills again.
Right.
And I think things might get ugly at that point unless there's like more stimulus, or they extend some of these, loan forbearances and that type of stuff.
Well, that's another part of the equation that I think it's going to smack people square in the face. So mortgage forbearance, I think a lot of the loan companies offered 18 months to start 18 months back in March. That ends at the end of September as well. But it's not like those payments are forgiven, right? They get tacked on to the end of, but they get tacked on either now or they get tacked on to the end of the loan. Like, it's a lot of money, 18 months to accumulate. Do you think people have actually saved that money? And obviously not, right? Because we can see that, like, the CPI is up 5% year over year, or at least it posted a 5% gain over the prior 12 months. So, like you said, inflation is up. What are people going to do?
Yeah, I don't know the specifics of the mortgage forbearance, but
Mhm.
when I first saw them introducing ideas, it was you're either going to have to pay the money. I mean, even your mortgage is $2,000 a month. Let's say $1,000 would be on 18 months would be $18,000. 2,000 would be $36,000.
Yeah.
I'm guessing most people aren't sitting around with $18,000 to $36,000 saying, "Hey, I didn't make these payments for 18 months, but I'm going to pay you now."
Right.
Uh, it's it really reminds me of my entire youth and early 20s of as I got some money and I lent people money. It only taught me to never lend money people ever again, because like you lend them money and then it's like, "Oh, I need that money back," and they're like, "Oh, I ain't got it." I'm like, "You got new shoes." And then I saw you at the bar last night, like buying people shots. Where's my money at? So it's the likelihood that people have saved all that money. Savings did go up if you looked since COVID hit. Savings have went up, but it's the people that were already kind of doing okay are the ones that saved.
Right.
They kept working. They worked from home. That type of, like, they had constant income coming in, and they stopped traveling. They stopped doing a lot of things. So they actually saved money. Everybody else, if you're at a point where you're not paying your mortgage or your rent because you weren't working or you're having financial harm because of COVID, there's a high probability you weren't saving money either. So I highly doubt anyone's going to pay that money back. So let's go tack that onto the mortgage. And maybe that's what we're seeing going on in the housing market right now. People are expecting everyone's mortgage is going to get 10, 20, 30 grand tacked on because who's going to pay it? Well, another option I've seen is they're going to allow people to extend them out to 40 years. So I don't know if you ever ran the table on a 30-year mortgage versus a 40-year mortgage, but the amount of interest you pay on a 40-year mortgage is mind-blowing.
Oh, I can imagine.
So now you got to tack on another 20, 30 grand and stretch that bitch out for 10 more years.
Yeah.
You're going to be underwater on that house forever unless inflation just gets really crazy, right? So what's the long-term effect on the housing market just from that alone is a little bit concerning because, I was just telling a friend, the house I grew up in, which is, slightly larger than a 2-car garage in America. It's a very small baby boomer row house, right? And not a great area. That house sold last year for $84,000. And if you think about it, where could you even get a house for $84,000? So you can probably get a rough idea what this house is like and where I grew up. It just sold again right now for like $136,000. So it went from 84 to 136 in a shitty neighborhood in 1 year. What I'm concerned now is even, what's a mortgage payment on an $86,000? Not a lot, right? No. Property taxes, not a lot. That allowed a working class person to own a home, right?
Right.
Is that working class person now going to be able to own that home because they're selling for $150,000? And it's a little bit concerning on my part that what's the next 5 years look like? And no one's going to be able to own a home unless you're making $100 grand a year.
Right. Right.
Whole other episode on that, but something I do not see people talking about right now.
It's interesting to think about that equation on the other side of the renter side, right? I found a stat, James. There's 6 million renter households, so 15 million people in those roughly, that have fallen behind on their payments or struggled to pay since COVID. Like, what happens when the moratorium ends on those?
Yeah, I've not seen a lot of information written about this because I feel like no one wants to talk about it. It's certainly not something the media wants to beat up. But are you just going to stiff? What I think is going to be this like great shift in apartment A people aren't going to pay, so they're going to go down the street to apartment B, and the people that were at apartment B, they're not going to pay apartment B. They're going to just leave and go to apartment A, and then you're going to see these people that were holding these notes on these apartment buildings, they're either going to get stiffed, or is there something out there that we don't know about that the government's doing to help landlords? I read something about that at some point, but I'm not sure it's going to cover people not paying their rent for this time. But they still owe the money. So what is that going to go on their credit report? Are they going to get sued? I think a lot of these people think that they're just never going to have to pay the money back. And maybe that's the case. But, your new apartment complex usually calls your old apartment complex to say, hey, did you have any issues with these people?
Right, right.
Well, how's that going to go? Yeah, they owe me 10 months back rent. So it's like, then, is that going to create an issue where people aren't going to find homes now? Because, man, there's a lot of unknowns right now. But, and I have some people that I know, I'm not calling anybody out, but, rode that massive unemployment, right? That was more money than they were making by far. And they sat home for quite a while. Well, I've had people and I heard stories where they were getting unemployment and they still didn't pay their goddamn rent. And that's where I found it kind of interesting. I'm like, wait a minute, you're getting all this money, but you're not paying your bills. So like when the when they did the PPP loans for businesses, you had to spend that money on very specific things, or you're going to pay that money back. And the kind of the issues with the unemployment and all this stuff was they didn't tell you where you had to spend the money. If you were getting $3 or $4 grand a month in unemployment in some cases with the boost way back then,
Right.
you probably could have paid some of your rent, right? Did you have to go 18 months without paying rent? So I feel like there's a lot of decisions that are probably going to come back to haunt people, and we just don't know it yet, unless they come out with a law to like, forgive all the rent, and they're going to take care of the landlords, and the landlords can't put it on their credit report, and they can't go after them and sue them. Like, I don't know, but
Can
I
you
feel like
see
everyone.
something? Sorry, James, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Can you see something like this triggering a downturn?
I feel like everyone's been looking for a downturn since the last downturn. Right?
Yeah, right.
But you see, like, unemployment was kind of screwing up the job market. Inflation's going on because we're overspending, plain and simple, right? We can't blame everything on supply chain issues. At some point, it's just saying, no, we're over consuming. But that no one wants to say that again, right? No one wants to say we're over consuming, because that is what props the economy up right now. But you saw lumber prices skyrocket. I was looking at a home not too far from my house as an investment property to put a family member in. We averaged around 225. It's a very small little community out in the middle of nowhere, and it's about the average price. And I'm like, I'm gonna go. That was yesterday. I went back and checked it, and I went to Zillow and refresh on some properties. They went from 225 to 325,
Wow.
as high as 350. And it's like, how does this end? Right?
Right.
How does this end well? You're either going to have a massive bust, or everything's going to be ridiculously expensive. Now, Kane, if you own stuff right now, inflation's great. If you own cars and properties and things that would go up in value, things are great. So my pickup truck, for example, I got a call from the place I bought it from. He's like, oh, we'll give you 60 grand for it right now. And I'm like, I think you only paid like 70 3 years ago. And I'm like, I got a bunch of miles on it and it's beat up. It's like, we'll give you 60 grand for it. I'm like, how are you giving me 60,000? I drove it for 3 years. He's like, look, man, no one can find trucks, and used car prices are through the roof right now.
Wow.
And I'm like, holy shit. Like, I was planning on beating the hell of this truck probably for like 6-7 years. But now I'm thinking about, like, shit, I might trade this truck in.
Yeah.
So if you own stuff during inflation, it's cool. If you own 5 properties or something, they all go up in crazy value. Well, you're way ahead. The problem is if you rent an apartment and you were thinking about buying your first home, well, that ain't looking so good no more. Because the house I grew up in is now going to be 150. And even the home in the little rural area out here is going for 325, 350 now. And those used to be starter home gains. Like, that's where someone went to like buy a home and start their life. They were affordable, small community. You're telling me like 325, 350 is now starter home in Michigan. Now, we're not talking California here. So how does this end? It doesn't seem like it's going to end well. It's either going to end in, sky high prices, which is really going to hurt the working class. And, they're going to come through and they're finally going to approve like a $15 minimum wage, right? The problem is $15 an hour right now is the equivalent to like $9 an hour 2 years ago. So that's one scenario. And the other option is everything busts. Stocks are inflated. Cryptos were inflated. But if you follow cryptos, as soon as they started pulling back on some of these programs and giving out money, you watch cryptos crash. So you've seen money pour into cryptos. You saw it pour into the game stocks. You saw it pour into Target and Amazon consumer spending, because everyone's taking the money from the school loans and not paying their rent and not paying their mortgages and the extra unemployment, and it went into cryptos and Target and cars and bikes and boats and RVs, and we're about to pull that plug. What do you think happens?
You raise consumer spending. I had a stat in front of me. I mean, consumer spending is usually about like 70% of US GDP, James. In Q1 of 2021, it sat at around 68.3. So it hasn't really moved. And so you throw into the equation that savings rates are up. You throw into the equation that people are pouring money into the stock market. Like I think that speaks to how much money is in the system that US GDP or consumer spending as a portion of US GDP hasn't really moved. Yet all this money is everywhere else as well. I think it speaks to the issue. I was going to say too, on the starter home thing, we both know somebody that I feel like has made all the right kind of career and life moves since maybe graduating from college and is in that stage now where they're ready to buy that starter home. And this last 18 months has just put a stop on them moving forward in life, or at least getting that starter out through no fault of their own, just for the fact that prices are ridiculous.
Yeah, and that their entry point into that home is do they buy the home now and hope that it just keeps appreciating like crazy, or do they end up buying a peak and end up like losing 100 grand overnight? And then,
Right.
very similar to 2008 again, it's these people end up backwards on their homes, where it's like, I bought this home for 300 and now it's worth 200. So I'm stuck here. I'm either going to have to sell it and write a check for 100 grand to get out of it, or I'm just going to have to sit here long enough and hope it gets back to 300. Now, I can't imagine spending 10 years in a house to just get back to you where, like,
Yeah.
that's what I'm saying. The scary part is, but going back, you're saying consumer spending looks flat.
Yeah. Right.
So, in that metric, does consumer spending count like travel, for example, or is it just goods?
I think it's just goods, but maybe we'll talk about it on another episode. I'm not sure.
I'm curious because there's no way. I felt like people shifted money from the things they were not spending money on travel, for example. So now they're spending it on buying a boat or an RV.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I'm not going to Cancun, but I find it interesting that consumer spending's flat, but I feel like every retail store's revenue is growing quite a bit.
That's a really good point. Yeah.
So how is that possible? If Amazon's got to hire another 100,000 workers, and we can't get there's so many boxes getting shipped that they don't have enough people to ship the boxes, and Trek bicycles is sold out of bicycles for 2 years. I showed you bikes even up to $6,000 were sold out.
Right.
Who the hell is buying $6,000 bikes at that pace? And you
Yeah.
can say maybe it's supply chain and they're not buying as much, but everywhere you went, boats, RVs, bikes, durable goods, keep in mind, were like sold the hell out. So I don't understand how consumer spending's flat, but people are consuming shit left and right.
It's true. It's true. Maybe it's a function of it just moving to different verticals.
It is, but the really interesting thing, I have no one really talk about the student loan aspect. So
Yeah.
I got to imagine if you got 100 grand in loans, I don't know, because I don't have school loans. Maybe it costs you $1,000 a month for those. And if you're, a married couple and you both got master's degrees, you might have $200,000, $300,000, $400,000 in school loans. That's costing you $2,000, $3,000, $4,000 a month.
Yep.
Well, yeah, if you weren't paying that for the last 18 months, you got an extra $2,000, $3,000, $4,000 to blow in the market, put in the cryptos and try to get rich, to put in the equities, to buy new stuff, new furniture for the house. And it's like, well, that's about to all end. So unless there's more stuff coming down the pipeline in terms of stimulus or, laws and whatnot, I think life's about to get really real for a lot of people.
Which goes to jobs. And I mean, we have an inside kind of look at the jobs market and how labor is moving. What is that? Do you see maybe the gap between supply and demand closing because people have to go back to work, or can you predict anything there?
Hey man, there's no sense in making predictions because the world makes no sense anymore.
That's true. That's true.
Yeah, we stopped living in a rational world a long time ago. But back to the person I know that has a in the apartment complex with the person above them that just bought a Jeep but has no job for 12 months. It's which I don't. How do you even get a Jeep unless you got a bunch of money in the bank? But my guess is if you got money in the bank, you're not living at this place. But I feel like at some point, right now, because Kane, if you think about it, if you don't got to pay rent, that's like the primary driver, right? You got to pay. You still got to pay your cell phone and your internet and your cable TV for a lot of people.
Right.
Those things are getting paid or they get turned off. But if you're not paying rent right now, what's your incentive to go to work? You don't need a whole lot. You need money for your cell phone bill and food. So you can see where those people weren't rushing back to the restaurants to go work at FedEx and get those Amazon jobs. So now when rent's due, I think things are going to change a little bit. And, I just drove by Arby's. They close Saturday and Sunday because they can't get workers on the weekend. Sign in the window, $16 an hour, $32K a year if you roughly work 40 hours a week for a year. Not bad money for working with some roast beef. Like, those jobs are going to get filled back up as soon as rent's due. And a lot of other jobs are going to start to get filled as soon as those school loan payments kick back in.
Yeah, right.
So I have to imagine once we kind of wean people off the bottle of the unemployment benefits and then say not just that, you also got to pay your rent. It's going to be like that Dunkin' Donuts commercial from like 20 years ago. It's like time to make the donuts. And it's like 5 a.m. and the dude's waking up in his fucking pajamas. That's going to be October. It's going to be time to make the donuts for a lot of people. And in the short term, there's a lot of opportunity. And I see people taking advantage of it. I know people that jump from like 60K to 80K just because they wanted to go to work or they're willing to go to work. And right now it's that time. If you, especially in the restaurant industry and those type of jobs, you come in and show yourself and you're dependable and you're reliable and they can count on you. You're going to go somewhere. And you can be a small restaurant manager and make a decent living. And it might take you a while otherwise, but right now, if you show up and bust your ass, I saw a FedEx sign that said $19 an hour. Came 40 grand a year to move some flipping boxes around. I couldn't imagine doing that. We talked another episode. Like, you get 18, 19, 20 years old making 40K. I'd be balling out of control at 19 years old making 40K. Yeah. And I'd pick up a side gig for another 20 hours, man.
Yeah, what inflation?
Yeah, dude, I'd be living great right now. I sure now wouldn't be sitting at my parents' house, complaining that there's no job out there where I could work from Starbucks making 80 grand a year. But a lot of opportunities if people really pay attention right now. There's moves to be made. There's going to be a lot of hurt for people. They're going to get stuck in these houses at 40-year loans or that they're backwards on because they overpaid or didn't pay overpaid on a new house or didn't make their payments. The people that are going to get screwed up on the rent who didn't pay. I got to imagine the student loans, they're probably not going to make you pay them. They're just going to tack it on to the principal, right? Or is that interest free? Do you know? They canceled interest, right?
Yeah. So it was, you weren't charged interest for this, whatever, 18 months or whatever.
I mean, that's not going to be too bad. It's not a bad deal.
Yeah, not a bad deal.
But it would have been a smart time to just pay him down.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
It's like those people that make they make like 2 payments on their mortgage every month. Mm-hmm. And then they end up paying their house off way faster, right? If you were working still and making money, you should have just paid your school loans while there was like no interest, right? But a lot of people didn't do that. That's the reason why I couldn't find a bike for a year.
Yeah, that's true.
Paying my school loans that suck, or get a new mountain bike. And that mountain bike's probably been sitting in their garage since then. But
yeah, that's true. That's true. I guess just to close out this conversation, James, I know that a lot of things are going away over the next 2 months or so, but there is the child tax credit that's going to kick in. Can you see that being relatively helpful for some people? How does that weigh in the equation of all these benefits? And I'm just thoughts there.
I don't actually know a whole lot about the child tax credit. I saw some headlines, but is that where they're getting it's like $3,000 per kid or $1,500 per kid or something like that? Or
I think that's right. Yeah, something like that.
my big issue with all these programs are it's not that I don't want to help people. It's that I grew up in that world where people got money and then they never spent the money on the things they were supposed to spend it on. Okay.
Hmm.
Like my mother got child support. I never seen the money from the child support. It That money went to the bar, and half the people in our neighborhood, if they ever got, you get your refund check from taxes or you got some kind of money from somewhere. It rarely went to like help a child, pay down a credit card debt. Someone usually got a new, not new, but like a used new Mustang. A jet. Someone got a jet ski or a new TV, more
Yeah.
cigarettes, more weed, more booze. You know, very rarely did you see that stuff actually change the way somebody lived. Around my neighborhood is a Finger Hut catalog. If you ever seen one of those things, but you can pretty much buy anything you wanted through payments through Finger Hut, and they tend to send those things out to lower income communities back then, anyways. But it's back to so much of that money often just goes to shit that never benefits the family or the child. More clothes, more bullshit, more jewelry, more jet ski, more parts for my Mustang to go fast. Um, and that's where I feel like helping the families with the money is great if the money actually goes to the kids, or was the money used for something productive. Half my family kind of grew up on trailer parks and food stamps and whatnot, and people would sell the food stamps back when you could. They would take, and then they take that for 70 cents on a dollar or whatever. They would always find some way to game the system, right? It wouldn't go for the goddamn food. It'd end up going to other shit, more smokes. So I'm sure it's definitely going to help some families. I just, from my own experience, is a lot of that money never really ends up benefiting the family in the long term, and especially not the children. So
Yeah.
it's and again, maybe there's some rules and regulations in there I don't know about, but if they're just giving you a tax credit for having children, you're going to incentivize people that have more children. It's a whole other conversation, but
Yeah. Yeah.
if there's some stipulations like, hey, that money's got to go towards like child care, for example, so people can work, then maybe that might be helpful. But in my own experience, when you live at a certain level, and that's where I grew up, people made really bad decisions when they got money. So I'm just going to give you a quick example. Like, I know a family member last year that got the windfall of unemployment.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think they're in a better spot right now than they were pre-COVID?
Yeah, I doubt it.
No, I feel like they're in a worse spot right now. All that extra money went to jewelry and clothes, electronics, new phone, TV. Do you think their credit card debt probably increased? Because when I asked, like, did you pay down any credit cards? Well, no. So,
Yeah.
last year was an opportunity to take this. It was probably for some people the greatest amount of like income they've ever gotten out of the blue as a pay raise, a windfall to do
Yeah.
something with it. And for the handful of people I still know at that level, did they do something productive with it? The answer is no. So they didn't pay off credit card debt. They didn't take a college class to try to improve their career. I mean, community college classes are pretty cheap. Really, none of it went to anything productive. They didn't pay down any medical bills. They didn't go to the dentist. There's all this stuff they could have done to improve their life a little bit. There's things they could have done for their children. They could have put some money in a college fund, and none of this stuff came.
Yeah.
And then you realize that how fast they can blow the money is not. It's almost surprising, but it's not. But one person in particular I had this conversation with last year. I'm like, well, we often talked about you live in a better life or you want a better life, and you blamed it on the area you lived in. And I always say move, because Kane, that's what I did. My area did not offer the far from the economic opportunities or the lifestyle or anything that I really wanted. It's when I was, 18, 19 years old. As soon as I got my first real check, I got out of there and I moved to a better area. So you got to go where the money is, right? My saying is I moved to a place that's got more banks and liquor stores. Now we had way more liquor stores than banks. And this person's in an area where KFC is the job because there's nothing there for them. So I say move. Well, it's first month's rent. It's going to be, and then security deposit. It's going to be $1,500, and I don't have that. And then I got to borrow someone's truck or rent a truck, and then all this stuff, right? And it probably cost them $2,000 to rent a U-Haul. First month's deposit, the deposit and first month's rent, right? Well, if you look at how much money they made on unemployment last year, more than what they were making at their other job.
Yeah.
They could have done that probably 5 or 10 times over. But they didn't use the money to move, to get into an area that's paying better money, that's got more opportunities, to an area with less crime, a place with better schools for their kids. They're in the same place, living the same life, with no difference in liquid assets and probably more debt at this point. Because now you're sucked into that life of spending that money. You're eating out, you're getting clothes,
Right.
you're buying jewelry, you're doing all this shit, and then it stops, and you keep doing it. Well, now you start racking up more debt. So I hope this lifts some people out of poverty, and I hope some kids do benefit from it. But just from me growing up in that lifestyle, unfortunately, I'm not sure that's going to be the case. So,
yeah, I think this is a conversation that we're going to keep having, in these kinds of videos, James. But it's going to be an interesting time for sure.
At the end of the day, I feel like there's a lot of politicians, there's a hell of a lot of academics, and a lot of wealthy people, to be honest, that always have the answer on how to solve poverty. Mm-hmm. And I feel like every time I see someone say, we're going to throw some money at it, it never fixes it. Yeah. Or we need to do this. I'm like, that's not going to fix it. Because most of these people that are coming up with the laws that are in academia, that are already, came from a upper middle class family, and now they're even wealthier. None of them really experience what it was like to be working class or below. And it's like, it's hard for, again, like my reoccurring theme I talk about, but me and my parents got past the 8th grade, and we came from that lifestyle. And so you have no idea what it's like to have to lift yourself out of the gutter with nothing, right? You're literally starting from zero. Some points you're starting with less than zero. The people trying to say I'm going to solve poverty have no idea what it takes to get from that even just to the middle class, right? But these are the people that keep coming up with the laws and coming up with the ideas and coming up with the plans, right? It's I'm wealthy, I got all the answers, and it's like, yeah, you never missed a meal in your life though, right? So I don't want to listen to you. But again, I'm hoping the money helps somebody. I just don't think we're going to see a whole lot change in poverty here anytime soon.
Yeah. I will definitely have to dive into your story a little bit more, James, on another video. But well, let's call it for now, and we'll talk again.
Sounds good. I'll catch you later.
All right. Thank you.